In the last lesson, we spoke about how America was the last nation to get involved in World War One. And the question is, why were we not in the war in the beginning? And why did it take so long? Why did we get involved in the first place? Well, America does not like to be involved with foreign wars. At least they didn't used to be. And so we always tried to stay neutral. We tried to be friends to everybody and stay out of their bickering and conflicts. A lot of the conflicts would stem from one king not liking another king. It really had nothing to do with the nation itself. And so Americans recognized that it was silly to get involved in Europeans' war because they're always getting into wars. If you look at the 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, and now the 20th century, they're constantly getting into wars with each other. And America had nothing to gain, not only things to lose with trade. You get involved with one country, then the other country doesn't like you and they won't trade with you. And that's not what Americans wanted. They wanted to continue with their business as normal. And so we remained neutral. And that's our first word here for the day. Neutral is not choosing sides in a dispute or war. So we remained neutral. If we looked at our lesson yesterday, you see all these countries here. These are neutral powers: Spain, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark. They don't want to be in this war, and they remain neutral. Belgium wanted to remain neutral, but Germany attacked them. So, and America was neutral up until almost the end of the war. And so the question is, what got us into the war? Uh, President Wilson promised that he would not get us in the war, and for his first term, he kept to that promise. And what ended up happening was that there was a new weapon in warfare, and that was what was called the U-boats. Those are submarines. And when you have a naval combat, what would usually happen is that they would shoot at each other, partially blow up a ship. It wouldn't sink, and the other side would take it over. Or if it was sinking, people get on lifeboats, and then the ship that sunk this ship would pick up all the survivors and drop them off at a safe port. And few people, I mean, a lot of people would die, but fewer people would die in that type of naval warfare. There was a respect for life. They were trying to blow up ships, not necessarily kill people. With the U-boat, there was no capacity to pick up survivors. They would torpedo a boat and then try to get away before somebody would come after them. And so they would let the boat sink on its own, and a lot of people would die. It would be very difficult to rescue survivors. So this was a form of brutal warfare on the high seas, and U-boats were the key weapon in this. And so the um, the American ships that are sailing back and forth, they're bringing supplies to Britain as well as Germany, but Germany doesn't want Britain to have these supplies, so they go around sinking ships that have American flags or Americans on them. And you're supposed to leave your lights on if you're neutral. And so the Germans started what was called an unrestricted warfare, where they just started sinking anybody that was not German. And so they didn't care what flag you sailed under. They started going after all these ships. And so they sank the Lusitania. It was carrying almost 2,000 passengers. 139 U.S. citizens were aboard. 129 of them perished. And President Woodrow Wilson demanded that the Germans end their submarine warfare against commercial vessels, no matter what flag they sailed under. And the Germans relented for a time, but then they started doing it again. And that made America very angry. But it wasn't enough to get them in the war. Then the Germans, knowing that the Americans were starting to lean towards the Allies, they sent a telegram to Mexico, which was intercepted by the British, and it was called the Zimmerman Telegram. And it urged Mexico to join the Central Powers and, try eventually go to war against America. And they promised the Mexicans, or in this telegram, they are promising the Mexicans that they will reclaim territories that they lost in the American Southwest. If you remember, in US 1, you have this area here, not just Texas, but California, Arizona, New Mexico, and other parts of other states that were all a part of Mexico during this time. And first Texas breaks away from Mexico, and then the Southwest California are taken over when America and Mexico get into a war. And so this was all Mexican land before that war. And so the Germans thought, well, you know what? Let's promise them that land back. We'll help you get that land back if you keep America busy during this war. And then once Germany wins, we'll come over and help out the Mexicans. Well, that's now a direct threat, and so American public they got fearful of an attack on their homeland, and so they knew that the Germans were not on their side. And along with submarines sinking their ships, it was time for America to go to war. And so the Yanks are coming. Yanks are the nickname for Americans that the British and Europeans call us. And so we start getting together and start building up our army to send over to Europe. Now, in World War One, another thing I want you to remember are the new ways of which warfare is being conducted. We now have airplanes. Remember the Wright brothers? The U.S. Army was very interested. Once that got going, every major country in the world wanted their hands on airplanes. And World War One, which is only a few years removed from the Wright brothers, all of these countries have very good airplanes to fight in the skies. Trench warfare has been around for a long time, but in World War One they really turned it into a science where they build trenches, they dig holes, made barbed wire, machine gun nests, and made defensive positions very, very strong. Then you have poison gas. When they use gas warfare, try to suffocate, burn, kill, maim enemy soldiers with gas. And this was a horrible way of conducting warfare. And then, of course, tanks, armored vehicles, going over rough terrain, being impenetrable to bullets, and breaking these trenches with the tanks. So you've got airplanes, trench warfare, poison gas, and tanks are the new ways to fight. You've got the Zimmerman telegram. Death on Lusitania is the ship that was sunk by the Germans that made the Americans very mad. And these two things helped get America into the war. And then finally, our word of the day, neutral, not choosing sides in dispute or war. Finally, in April 2nd, 1917, the Americans did declare war and did join the Allies, completing our little list here with the British Empire, French, Russians, Serbians, Belgians, and now the United States.